Have you ever looked through Arthur Chu's tweets? Have you wanted any evidence that the whole SJW movement is actually an attempt to derail the left and distract it from any genuine socialism? Just look through Arthur Chu's tweets. He really hates socialism, and he's very much in favour of social division. This clearly isn't Arthur Chu. It's Todd in the shadows where he is. I don't know who he is. He creates music. He says, the calling people on their racism just makes them more racist. People never seem to offer an alternative game plan. Anyway, Arthur Chu's response, he says sardonically, I guess there's give them money until they become nice. Did he just say, my taxes, my taxes? So he's against alleviating poverty. If there's social unrest, he doesn't think alleviating poverty is a good idea. He thinks probably the best idea is to just shout angry retorts at each other until violence erupts. Yeah, that'd be better, Arthur. Crap. More of Arthur's bitter sarcasm revolves around the phrase economic anxiety, which has been used by some commentators to describe the reasons for Trump's popularity, and he's making sardonic comments about that to such an extent that at some point somebody has turned around to say, stop saying economic anxiety, Arthur, it's getting annoying. To which he's replied, you first, you fuckers. So, in fact, Arthur's against talking about the economic reasons why Trump might have won, and the fact that Clinton was failing to offer any changes to the economic system that created greater economic divides. He's not interested in that. He wants to derail that conversation. That offends him, that we should start talking about economic inequalities. So what's basically happened in politics is socialism became unfashionable as the result of certain incidents that occurred during the 1970s. It was already unfashionable in America. In America, it had been unfashionable since the 50s. American anti-socialism was more ideologically based. There was an ideological opposition to communism and a fear of communism. Socialists said that anything that was vaguely socialistic was considered to be backdoor communism coming in. American fears about communism may even be religious. They didn't need the idea of the invisible hand of market forces. They already believed in an invisible hand. Rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate. God made them high and lowly and ordered their estate. Well, British anti-socialism was rather more secular and required more secular reasons. After all, we're a nation of bloody heathen, really. In Britain, it was more of a reaction to what happened with some economic collapse in the 70s with the winter of discontent, which was blamed on the unions having too much power. So in the 80s we have the rise of Thatcherism and at the same time the rise of Reaganomics in America, which is proposing less state intervention in the economy and allowing free market forces, the invisible hand, to do its work, and expecting the invisible hand to in some way be benevolent and that somehow there'll be some trickle-down effect would mean that we'd all benefit, we'd all drag ourselves up by our bootstraps, which failed to happen, obviously. Say she was just against state intervention actually is a bit of a lie. That's a very convenient lie for, if you're sort of anarcho-capitalist, they can lie to say, she was just against state intervention. She wasn't against state intervention. She was quite happy to have the state intervene in breaking up unions. She was quite happy to have the state intervene to prevent strike action by workers. And if all economics is the product of the invisible hand which we should all trust, then surely strike action is also a product of the invisible hand of social forces, and maybe the state shouldn't be interfering. She was just against state intervention occurring on behalf of the poor. Rhetoric of non-interference can be quite a manipulative thing, because you can decide when you're quite happy with something happening, you can say, well, I'm being non-interfering, and then start interfering when you don't like it. Now, what happened in the late 90s with Blair and Clinton was then you start maintaining those same economic policies, while also having a sort of left-sounding virtue-signaling rhetoric regarding racism and sexism and all that sort of thing, which you could still use to discredit your enemies, but no desire to change the economic system at all, being in favour of the economic system, because of course your investors are corporations, and your investors are invested in maintaining those economic inequalities. But Arthur's actually actively against talking about that. Arthur's actively against talking about economic inequalities. He doesn't want the left to do any soul searching at all about their failings. You see, there is a reason why the socialists have always been anti-racism, anti-sexism, and I suppose other isms as well. Those two predominantly. And it wasn't just about virtue, it was a very pragmatic reason for it as well. It was divisive of the working class, divisive of the workers. We were turned against each other. It would be very easy for those who ruled us to get us to blame each other for our predicament rather than seeing that we have a common enemy. So, what the socialists were saying was, hey, rather than blaming poor immigrants for taking a job, you're turning around to the employers and saying, hey, why are you paying them so little? You can't get away with paying people as little as that. Pay them the same amount you would pay me. And that way we get both of our jobs. So yeah, it was putting the blame onto the exploitative employers and not onto the different factions of the working class being played off each other in order to race to the bottom to get the cheapest possible labour you could. So what socialism, proper socialism, is very firmly against is blaming your poverty on other people based on the colour of their skin or place of origin rather than their position in the class system. So in fact, it was against the very thing that this sort of neoliberal socialist justice warriors do. Fuck ending division, says Arthur Chu. I want the division between me and Trump voters to be absolute and everlasting. Let's talk about being part of the problem. Actually, do you know, Chu, we're not talking about the Trump supporters. We're talking about all the Democrats supporters who stayed at home because they couldn't get up the enthusiasm to be a crappy candidate. How about all those? Those who just went, do you know, I can't vote for either of these people. They're both as shit as each other. Neither of them offer me what I want. What about those? You gonna stop being divisive with those? Socialists hate affirmative action and how it just creates a more diverse 1%, so we can look forward to it withering in the next few cycles. What do you want affirmative action for? You're an Asian working in tech. You're hardly in a field in which you're underrepresented ethnically. It's bizarre, isn't it? Yeah, I don't think there's any programs to get more Asians in tech. I don't think it's considered to be necessary. Right, so, not that that matters. And that's the thing, you see. If it did, it'd be kind of racist, wouldn't it? It'd be kind of racist to say we've got too many Asians in tech. Got to keep the Asians out of tech until it's more equal. That'd be racist. And that's why a lot of us are against affirmative action. Because it's racist. And not only is it racist, it promotes racism as well. Because it means that if you are in a minority within a particular industry, people are going, "Oh, you only got any because of that affirmative action," which impacts on people that are perfectly skilled and perfectly deserve to be there. They just happen to be of an ethnic group that is underrepresented in the industry, or gender group that's underrepresented. So, yeah, I mean, I am against affirmative action. I don't deliberately call myself a socialist. I call myself a socialist, and I also call myself a men's rights activist. And they're completely two separate things. They're completely separate from each other. Well, actually, they're not completely separate from each other. However, if I went into all the reasons why they're not completely separate from each other, I'll be here all day, wouldn't I? Let's skip on. They're not completely separate. But of course, not all socialists are men's rights activists, and not all men's rights activists are socialists. And if you listen to the media, you'd think there'd be no intersection at all, except now you're talking about brocialists. So at least some of the feminists and social justice warriors acknowledge an overlap between the left and the MRAs, which is strange because the argument always used to be that the MRAs were all right-wing rednecks. Now they acknowledge they're not all right-wing rednecks. It's talking about Bernie's bros and all that. But the funny thing is, the left that they are referring to as brocialists generally would not have anything to do with men's rights activism. Even Ali Fogg won't have anything to do with men's rights activism. I mean, that's the only thing he writes about. But that's the thing. Once the media narrative has established that MRA is synonymous with being a regressive misogynist, and then it's very easy to use as a silencing tactic to call somebody an MRA. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I promise I'm not. I'm not. I think Amnesty International being accused of being men's rights activists by some feminists because they are against the Nordic model. Which has nothing to do with men's rights activism at all. It's to do with human rights issues regarding sex workers. Ironically, most of your Bernie's bros will not identify as men's rights activists, but because I actually do fall into this intersection, I thought, well, you know, stick the label on there. Same as it was with MRA, really. I got called MRA because we weren't men's issues, and I thought, oh, it's just like it was an insult. Why is that an insult? Do you think that men shouldn't have rights? Why shouldn't I be advocating for them? And now they're using brocialist as a sort of slur against socialists, who I actually do happen to be a men's rights activist who's also a socialist. So, yeah, I'll take it. Okay, I'm a brocialist. Right. Now, actually, there isn't that much affirmative action going on anyway. It's a bit of a myth, and it's a myth that promotes racism. That's why we don't want it. Even without it, the very idea that we have it promotes racism. So that's why we shouldn't have it, because if we actually had it, that would promote even more racism. So let's not have it. Because one area in which we do actually have affirmative action going on is in the Labour Party itself, where women-only shortlists exist to make sure that there are more women in Labour seats in Parliament, and I think it's very negative there. I think that is a very bad idea. I think it would impact negatively on women MPs that have every right to be there, and it also brings in women MPs that perhaps shouldn't be there. I don't want to mention their names. I do. I so much want to mention names. But another time. Very, very soon, I should imagine. And it's possible to say, of course. It's possible to say, that's the trouble as well. When you've got affirmative action, it's possible to say who is there because of affirmative action, and who is there because they have every right to be there. And because it's impossible to say, that it's very easy to cast aspersions. I could say the only reason we have Jess Phillips is because of affirmative action. It may well be that Jess Phillips was the best candidate. If no one else was available, you know. I'm trying to imagine a situation, what kind of cataclysmic disaster would have to take place for Jez Phillips to be the best option available. There'd been a great flood. Jez Phillips is one of the few survivors. You might go, oh, well, you're our best bet, Jess. Yeah, so that illustrates the problem, doesn't it? It's very easy to cast aspersions and saying you shouldn't really be here. It's things about affirmative action, and therefore it promotes sexism in this particular instance. I could say that to any female MP that I think is rubbish, which is why it's not a good idea. I don't think it is a good idea, and I think it's a mistake to have made a pledge for that, which Corbyn has done. I might need to do a little erratum on this, because actually I said that he supports all female shortlists because he did in September, but now in October he's now dismissed the calls. But it's a bit strange because he's still saying that he promises that there'll be 50%, or at least 50% of Labour seats will be female. How's he going to ensure that without resorting to shortlists? It's one of the criticisms I have of Corbyn is his eagerness to appease feminists when the feminists that inhabit the sort of neoliberal Blairite bloc of the Labour Party are some of his most vicious opponents. Why does he owe them any favours? It should be about whoever's best for the job. It should be gender blind, not positively discriminating. Some would argue that positive sexual discrimination is contradicting terms because all sexual discrimination is negative. And I include myself in that sum. So, going back to what Arthur Chu was saying there, we were against it because it just creates a more diverse 1%. Yeah, I think the fact that the majority of the wealth is in the hands of 1% of the population is a much bigger issue, Arthur, because I think that affects almost all of us. Well, 99% of us. That affects almost all of us. This is the whole point. This is why we don't want division, because division means that we're against each other rather than identifying the common enemy. You might as well just come out and say, look, we don't want any difference made with class divisions. We like class divisions. We love the class divisions. We just want to be in that 1% too. You can't all be in the 1%. You're never all going to be in the 1% because it's 1%. None of us are all going to be in it. Why does it make any difference to you if some of those 1% are Asian, or which actually they are already? Some of those 1% are black or whatever. Why does that make any difference to you? This is exactly why socialism is anti-racism, because of people like Arthur Chu, who is clearly a racist, who uses his racism to derail socialism. Oh, this is eerie. Whatever I say, the next tweet I find actually seems to be a response to what I've just said. Yeah, he's talking about reverse racism here. Lee Fang's actually said, and really, if you think about it, this toxic identity-only politics becomes its own form of racism when you can prejudge anyone by race. To which Arthur Chu was going, here it is, just say it, man. Reverse racism. Nothing reverse about it, mate. It's just racism. Reverse is the bit that's unnecessary, because the word racism doesn't actually describe who is the race that is on the receiving end of the prejudice and who is the race who is delivering the prejudice. It doesn't say anything about that. So it's just racism. Sorry, Arthur, you're a racist. And you're not only a racist in the dictionary definition of racism, which is just any sort of one person of a race having prejudice to the other. But your racism also fits the sort of Marxist model of racism terms of the function of racism, in that it creates divisions that draws our attention away from the struggle of the bourgeoisie into a struggle between different groups within the proletariat. So, from a Marxist model, you're also a racist. I don't know what your system is. It's called intersectional feminist, or what you call it. Your philosophy, by which you can only be racist if you belong to the dominant majority. I don't know what that model is called, but it's nonsense. It's a nonsense model. It's a racist model. It's a racist model to imply that a particular vice can only be held by one race, but not another race. It's racist to say that there's different standards on behaviour for people of one race than there is another. Your model is in itself racist. Okay, a couple more here. We need to overcome our hatred and distrust of each other to fight the real pleases in speech while something has been said to him. Obviously, his response is, there's no we, there's no each other. Get fucked. There's no such thing as society, Arthur? We're all Thatcherites now. And then in response to the suggestion that the problem of identity politics rather than class politics is it excludes the critical demographic of white dudes, his response to that is, get fucked. Where does all the anger come from? I want to know where all his anger comes from. And I found a clue. We can debate my class privilege if we want, but the majority of people on my TL condemning Trumpists as inherently racist aren't well off. So presumably he is well off. And I've checked it. Yeah, he probably is. He is quite affluent. So he has some guilt associated with affluence. I think Arthur's afraid of reverse classism. Is that what it is? Are you afraid of reverse classism, Arthur? Don't worry about it, because although, you know, there are some people, working class, that hate the upper classes, it's not systemic. It's not systemic classism. I mean, that's what this is about. No, I don't. As much as I say I want to sort out economic inequalities, I don't want anyone to feel guilty for being affluent. Just that we should all have a sense of social responsibility to those less well off than ourselves, if we are. Now, let's suppose it's true that most of the people on his TL, I don't know what TL stands for, but let's suppose it's true that the majority of people on his TL that are condemning Trumpists as being inherently racist aren't well off. Well, then they would benefit from the soul searching that we're recommending the Democrats should be doing right now. It would benefit if the Democrats took a move to the left and actually started to change their economic policy in favour of one that reduces class divisions. That would be good for them, wouldn't it? It wouldn't actually be good for Arthur, though, because Arthur is actually doing quite well in terms of class. He wants to just assuage his class guilt he's obviously feeling. Then he's not helping them. In fact, he's as much an enemy to them as racist Trump supporters are, really. We should be debating Arthur's class privilege, which is saying we should butt out Arthur and let the Democrats have that soul searching that they really seriously need to do. Abandon the neoliberal agenda in favour of a more socialist agenda. Because if they aren't well off, and some of the disadvantages they're facing have nothing to do with race, they have nothing to do with poverty. I don't know why I'm picking on Arthur particularly. I was actually looking at Arthur's tweets because I saw a screen grab of one of Arthur Chu's tweets and I wanted to check out whether it was real or not. So I went to his Twitter account to look for it. And I couldn't find it, so I don't know if it was or not. It doesn't matter. What I found there indicated to me that he was anti-socialist. His old pushing of an agenda that's all about being anti-racist, supposedly anti-racist, although he is racist. I think that comes across quite clearly that he is racist under the flag of being anti-racist, is actually him trying to assuage his class guilt, which to me is the worst kind of racism. Your racism is to assuage your middle class guilt, or your affluent guilt. That's much worse than somebody being driven to racism by economic anxiety. I'm going to say it, because it obviously triggers him. That's much worse than racism being triggered by economic anxiety. I think we should be not only tough on racism, but tough on the causes of racism. And since one of the causes of racism is economic anxiety, let's sort out the economic issues that are causing an environment in which racism can proliferate. I suppose one of the reasons is that I thought, well, I'll do a little video on this, is we're always being told by the alt-right, and the alt-right obviously have a problem with the SJWs, always been told that the SJWs is a product of Marxism. They're not a product of Marxism at all. Derailers of Marxism. And we'll do a video at some point on the whole nonsense of cultural Marxism being the conspiracy theory the alt-right have about where the SJW have come from, why they exist. And there's clearly mixed reasons why they exist. But to me it seems that one of the reasons they exist is because they do exactly what racists used to do, which is create division amongst the working class so that they are not united against the real source of our problems, which are those that benefit from massive inequalities in class. And Arthur's really just a case study I was looking at there. So, in an upcoming video, I'm going to look at the Labour Party and the social justice phenomenon, particularly amongst the Blairites, and how it's used to make character assassinations against their political enemies. This, I think, is something that I don't think we can talk about very much, is how the SJWs sabotage genuine socialism. That's what as I say, I'm going to be looking particularly at the Labour Party in the next video. To that time, remember, of course, I'm just one blind man reporting the nature of elephants. Other opinions are available. Cheerio.
This country, and it is primarily lower income communities. You go to low income communities, many of the children have asthma. Do you know that? Okay. Pardon me? Go ahead. No, take it.
Look, she's just introduced the fact that her son has asthma, so she can contribute to this discussion on the problems of asthma in working class communities.
We're in the doctor. He's on several steroids. He's a teenage boy who's probably underweight partially because of this, but he's very athletic, and it hurts my heart that one summer he was literally put on basically bed rest because his lungs weren't strong enough, and it's hard to get them strong when we've got garbage being burned in our backyard. So the question specifically, my black son, okay, I know you're scared to say black, I know you're scared to say reparations, because it seems like every time...
I don't think that's a fair
I'll let you
statement.
finish as well. But it seems like every time we talk about black people and us getting something for the systematic oppression and exploitation of our people, we have to include every other person of color. So today, can we
She's not
please
even complaining
talk
about having to include
specifically
whites, she's
black
complaining about
people
having to include other people
and
of colour.
reparations?
We can talk about what I just indicated, in my view. is that when you have, and you and I may have a disagreement on this, because it's not just black, it is Latino. There are areas in America, in poor rural areas, where it's whites, okay? So I believe that in a country which has more income and wealth inequality than any other country, that yeah, the time is long overdue to start investing in poor countries. We have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth, especially within the African American community. So what I've said black 50 times, all right? That's the 51st time, all right? But this is a national issue, all right? So what we want and what I believe we should do, all right, is to invest most heavily in those communities most in need. And when you have 35% of black children living in poverty, when you have half of the kids in this country in public schools on free or reduced lunches, when youth unemployment in the African American community is 51%, those are exactly the kinds of communities that you invest in.
Today he was talking about poverty. He was talking about the situation where poverty has a negative impact on young people's health. And she was going to join in the discussion. Starts talking about her son that's got asthma from garbage being burnt. And she suddenly talks about black reparations. And presumably that garbage being burnt is infecting the lungs of every child in her community. Not just the black kids in her community, but every kid in her community. It's hard not to think that she wasn't a stooge that was put in there by Clinton in order to portray Sanders as a racist, because he's not prepared to talk about black reparations. I think he probably thinks that the issue of poverty is rather more serious and would benefit people of all races that happen to be poor. Notice actually Sanders gets a bigger applause than the woman who is bringing up her black son, not just a son. Starts off as just a son. My son's got asthma. I'm worried about these athletics. Black son! Before she starts doing that, she gets far less applause. She gets one or two lone voices shouting things, heckling. But the big applause goes to Sanders. Sanders did speak to people of all races. And the one or two that wanted to make it specifically about race, and we're a little minority that were trying to discredit him, trying to derail the socialist revolution that was occurring within the Democrats successfully, sadly. It's been anti-universalism. Chu is being anti-socialism. Sorry, you're an anti-socialist, and you're the reason the left isn't working anymore.